Welcome back to the channel, you sneaky cloak and dagger Alpha Legion sympathizers. This is Sprues and Studs, and it would appear that we are done with the Alpha Legion action figures that are in regular power armor or artificer armor for now. We have now graduated to the big and blocky boys that are the Cataphractii Terminators. So in this review, we are going to be taking a look at the Legion Praetor in Cataphractii Armor to see if this chunky boy lives up to the high standards that were set before him. Starting off with the top of the Cataphractii Armor, you've got the standard Alpha Legion communications array. Surrounding the helmet, almost in a portrait-like form, are these two very deeply shaded Hydra heads, in which I'm actually really astounded by the copious amount of shading in this area. Usually JoyToy skimps out with the depth of flavor, but they have brought the taste full force. Just like the rest of the Alpha Legion that have been released prior to this Legion Praetor, he sports the same large crest. The glaring red metallic eyes look especially intimidating and menacing, which is the aura I believe that the Alpha Legion wants to exude. There really isn't too much to say about this right pauldron, but that's not a bad thing. You've got your standard Alpha Legion gloss metallic turquoise, which is in line with the rest of the action figures. However, the spice is really brought out in this left pauldron due to the red hot detailed Hydra icons that have been doused with a generous amount of shading. You can see the depth when it pulls into the recesses of the Hydra scales, but I wanted to point out how insanely textured these leather fringes are right here. You can literally feel the patina with your eyes with all this lovely cross-hatching that is going on. The arms are fairly plain, save this right one, which I will get to during the weapons part of the review. With the chest and torso area center stage, we have this gunmetal collar right here. Then the two dark green chains that flank this collar region is a fantastic look in my opinion. I think the Hydra head that is right in the middle of the armor binds the whole entire aesthetic of the action figure together, and this gunmetal fringe really helps bring out the flavor in this area too. Finishing out this area is the torso, which has some decorations in the form of 3 cables that span the length of the top down to this waist area. Then moving on to the waist area, surprisingly enough, there really isn't too much to see, which is slightly disappointing to me. However, this region is not completely devoid of detail because you have the large Alpha Legion buckle being prominently displayed in the front. Finally, the only other accessory piece is this rather flowy looking tabard. I like at the bottom of the tabard, the fringe is a little bit ragged. Then within the deeper folds and creases, there is some shading which gives this section a sort of soft velvety texture. Now moving on with the legs, there is plenty of gunmetal outlining that surrounds the thigh area as well as the rest of this lower region. Without this accent, I guarantee you that this section of the action figure would look quite milquetoast. Unfortunately though, the lower portion of the legs is slightly disappointing to me because there are no Hydra scales that can be found anywhere here. It sucks that Games Workshop didn't make the design a little bit more cohesive. Finally, the back of the legs has more layers than a tiramisu cake, as well as some nice rivets right here that are on the armor. Alright, the back of the Marine looks very similar to all the Cataphractii Marines that have been released prior. You've got this very highly detailed middle section that represents the power plant of the armor, except there are some cables up here that run to the antenna. Aside from that, the only other thing that dominates the back is this off-white cape. I suppose the shading choice really gives off this grungy kind of vibe. Then on the other side of the cape is a solid black color, which looks a bit boring and could use some edge highlighting right here to bring out the peak areas. However, I love the way that the cape is attached to the action figure. If you join me on the reviews of the Hero Master, Praetor, as well as the Salvatore, I was harping on the attachment point of the cape and constantly referring to exactly how this cape is attached, in which this is the most perfect way to attach this flowing piece of fabric, or in this case, manufactured plastic. Also in the leg area, I wanted to point out the joints have been upgraded to a metal joint right here, as well as a metal joint on the ankle area. Moving on to the armaments, we have a power sword, which takes on a very peculiar archaic vibe. The anachronistic air is given off by these red cables that run from the spine of the sword all the way to the back of the power plant that is located right above the hilt here. I really can't say I'm a fan of this design because I believe it goes against the aesthetics of the Alpha Legion. Aside from that, this is likely the lightest blade, color-wise, that I've seen. Usually there's only a hint of light silver on the business end of the blade, but the silver on this one encompasses the whole entire weapon, save a slight sliver of gunmetal backbone right here. Why, oh why, does JoyToy decide to attach this Volkite charger on this action figure right here? This always remains a mystery to me and proves to be a little bit irksome. I would not like to have my action figure wield guns all the time, but looks like we are anchored by this piece of machinery permanently. Anyway, this Volkite charger is rather menacing looking in that the black and gunmetal dominates the whole entire look of the gun. There are, however, some very small accents of red and gold, but I'm glad that these colors do not detract from the sinisterness of the gun. Now it is time to compare this Alpha Legion Praetor to other more recently released Space Marines. We have the Hero Master that comes up to this Alpha Legion Praetor's collar. Same thing with the Black Legion Chosen. And next we have the Khorne Berserker. How could we forget the Resident Blood Angels version 3 Intercessor? And finally, how could Titus not make a guest appearance? Alright, I will let you know, I actually had really high hopes for this action figure in terms of both aesthetics as well as construction. You all know how much I love Cataphractii Armor Terminators, which further built up the anticipation for me, but I feel like I'm kind of let down because of my predetermined biases. So what areas really soured me on this Terminator? For starters, the power sword looks a bit cumbersome and quite Neolithic, which I'm not too much of a fan of. The fact that the Volkite charger is attached to the arms of the action figure is really detracting to me as well. And finally, where the hell are the scales on this action figure? It really needs it. Yes, I do apologize, I'm being quite nitpicky and judgmental, but that's kind of what a review is. But if you take a step back, in all honesty, this is actually not a terrible looking figure. In fact, it is quite solid in terms of construction as well as overall aesthetic, especially the Hydra icons that are on the pauldron, as well as the leather fringe. Finally, to let you all know, I am glad to report there are absolutely no inhibitions of articulation. Would I recommend this action figure to an Alpha Legion enjoyer? My answer still would be a solid yes, but I'm not too sure that I would encourage non-Alpha Legion enjoyers to try to pick up this action figure to fill the ranks of their collection due to the flaws that I pointed out. And plus, I think that there are actually better representations of Alpha Legion action figures that I have reviewed prior, especially the Hero Master as well as the regular Alpha Legion Praetor. But if you're inclined to pick up this action figure, click in the link in the description below, or you will be brought to the purveyor of these fine goods by the name of David Toys. David Toys is where I get all of these fantastic action figures because they have awesome customer service and they have free tariffless shipping. And then also, use the code SNS to receive 12% off of your purchase. Please let me know in the comments section, members of the chapter, what you thought of this action figure, or whether you thought that I was a little bit too critical and harsh for no reason. I would like to hear your comments. And with that being said, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.